Have you ever walked into a store and realized a simple handbag costs more than a car? Or seen people fighting over limited edition pieces like they were priceless treasures? Today, that feels completely normal in the luxury world. But what most people don't know is that one of the most influential luxury brands on the planet started from something that seemed almost impossible. A joke, and not the kind of joke that was supposed to become a billion-dollar empire. In the beginning, nobody looked at it and thought they were witnessing history. There was no sense that a global phenomenon was being born. Quite the opposite. Most people looked at the idea with skepticism, and even mockery, because back then the fashion industry was incredibly rigid. Luxury brands were all about perfection. Everything had to feel elegant, sophisticated, and almost untouchable. Luxury was serious, traditional, exclusive. So imagine the shock when a brand suddenly appeared doing the exact opposite, instead of following the rules. It looked like it was making fun of them. The designs were different. Some pieces looked way too simple to justify the price tag. Others felt strange the moment people saw them, and it made everyone ask the same question: who would actually pay for this? Critics laughed. Fashion experts said it would never work. Some people even saw the brand as an insult to the entire concept of luxury itself. But there was one thing nobody realized at the time. The more ridiculous it looked, the harder it became to ignore. Because there's something fascinating about revolutionary ideas. Almost all of them look ridiculous in the beginning. Whenever something truly new appears, people rarely react with instant admiration. Usually the first reaction is doubt, rejection, laughter. Human beings are naturally drawn to what feels familiar. And anything that breaks the pattern creates discomfort. But sometimes, that discomfort is exactly where revolutions begin. And that's exactly what happened here. While traditional luxury brands were trying to look perfect, this new brand was making people talk. And without realizing it, it started dominating the one thing that matters most in the modern world. Attention, because attention creates curiosity. Curiosity creates conversation, and conversation creates desire. The more people criticized the brand, the bigger it became, the more they laughed at it, the faster it spread. And then something even more unexpected happened. People started wearing those pieces precisely because they were different. It wasn't just about clothes or accessories anymore. It was about identity. It was about showing personality, about looking like someone who didn't follow traditional rules, and that changed everything. Because at that moment, the brand stopped selling products. It started selling belonging. The people wearing those pieces felt like they were part of something new, something not everyone understood yet. And that feeling of exclusivity is one of the most powerful weapons in luxury. The craziest part? Almost nobody noticed the transformation happening in real time. At first, it just looked like a weird trend, a passing phase, a joke that would disappear sooner or later. But slowly, celebrities started wearing the pieces. Influencers began talking about the brand. Artists turned it into a cultural symbol, and suddenly the thing people once laughed at started becoming status. The entire industry was confused. How was something so unlikely becoming so desirable? The answer was simple, but powerful. The brand understood something about human behavior that most companies completely ignore. People don't just buy products, they buy stories, and no story captures attention more than one that feels impossible. Luxury brand born from a joke sounded absurd, and maybe that's exactly what made it unforgettable. Before that brand came along and changed everything, the luxury world operated almost like a private club. Every detail was carefully controlled. Advertising campaigns looked like untouchable works of art. Stores felt silent, elegant, and intimidating. Products weren't presented as simple items people could buy. They were presented as symbols of a lifestyle most people could never reach. And that distance was intentional, because true luxury was never just about clothes, handbags, or accessories. It was always about status. People weren't buying products only for quality. They were buying the feeling of importance, the idea of entering an exclusive world that very few people had access to. Back then, almost every major luxury brand followed the same formula. The more serious a brand looked, the more sophisticated it seemed, the more inaccessible it felt, the more desirable it became. There was an invisible rule inside the fashion industry. Luxury had to look perfect, No exaggeration, no irony, no boldness that felt too risky. Everything needed to communicate tradition. And for decades, that formula worked perfectly. The biggest fashion houses built empires around this image of flawless elegance. They weren't just creating expensive products, they were creating social symbols. A single logo could represent wealth, power and prestige. And that's exactly why the arrival of this new brand made so many people uncomfortable, because it looked like it was breaking every rule at once. While the luxury industry tried to maintain a polished, untouchable image, this new brand showed up with something completely different. Some pieces looked strange, others felt exaggerated, and some were so simple that people genuinely couldn't understand why they cost so much money. To traditional fashion experts, it almost felt offensive. They looked at the brand and thought, there's no way this works. In their minds, luxury needed to follow strict standards. It had to represent timeless sophistication. It had to feel distant from mainstream culture. But the world was changing. And maybe the traditional luxury industry hadn't realized it yet, because a new generation was starting to see luxury differently. People no longer wanted quiet elegance alone. They wanted identity, originality. They wanted to wear something that grabbed attention and started conversations. And that's exactly where the new brand found its opportunity. It realized something before everyone else. Modern luxury didn't need to be subtle anymore. It needed to be memorable. Today, that shift might sound obvious, but back then it was almost revolutionary. For decades, the industry believed the secret of luxury was flawless perfection. Then suddenly, a brand appeared proving that imperfection, boldness, and even weirdness could create desire too, and that completely confused the industry. The criticism came immediately. Some people said it was just a temporary trend. Others claimed it was destroying the essence of traditional luxury. But while experts criticized it, something quiet was happening in the background. Regular people were paying attention, and that was dangerous for the traditional market, because attention is the most powerful force in modern culture. A brand can have history, craftsmanship, and prestige, but if nobody is talking about it, it slowly disappears into the noise. Meanwhile, this new brand felt impossible to ignore. Even people who hated it kept talking about it. Even critics helped spread the name. Without realizing it, the people trying to destroy the brand were actually helping it grow. And that's when the fashion industry started realizing an uncomfortable truth. The market had changed. The new generation didn't just want to look rich, they wanted to look unique, and that opened the door for an entirely new kind of luxury. A luxury less obsessed with tradition and far more connected to culture, personality, and visual impact. The brand understood this long before everyone else. While other companies were busy protecting old rules, it was creating new ones, and that's exactly where the revolution began. The most fascinating part of this entire story is that the brand didn't grow despite the criticism. It grew because of it. While traditional companies were terrified of controversy, this new brand seemed to feed off people's reactions. And in the beginning, almost every reaction was negative. People said the products were over the top. Others claimed it shouldn't even be considered luxury. Some saw the whole thing as a complete joke within the fashion world, but without realizing it, the critics were making a massive mistake. They were giving the brand exactly what it needed most: attention. And in the modern world, attention is worth more than any multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. Because there's an invisible rule that controls the internet, pop culture, and human behavior. Anything that divides opinion becomes powerful. The moment something creates debate, it stops being just a product, it becomes a conversation. People start arguing about it, defending it, attacking it, trying to understand it, and that's exactly what happened. The brand became a topic. Everywhere, in restaurants, on social media, in magazines, at events, everybody had an opinion. Even people who hated the brand ended up spreading the name without realizing it. And that created an incredibly powerful effect. The more people talked about it, the more curiosity it generated, the more absurd it seemed, the more people wanted to understand why it was becoming so famous. It's almost automatic psychology. The human brain is naturally drawn to things that feel different, Things that break patterns. And when millions of people start talking about the same thing at once, collective curiosity takes over. Everybody keeps talking about this, so there must be a reason. That's when the brand truly started growing, not through instant approval, but through cultural relevance. It understood something many companies still fail to realize today. Being ignored is far worse than being criticized, because criticism still means people are paying attention to you. And the stronger the reaction the brand created, the harder it became to ignore. But there was something even smarter happening behind the scenes. The brand wasn't just selling clothes, bags, or accessories, it was selling identity, and that completely changes the way people consume. Because when someone buys a product, the decision is usually rational. But when someone buys identity, the decision becomes emotional. People started wearing those pieces to communicate something about themselves. It wasn't just, "I like this outfit." It became, "I'm different. I understand trends before everyone else. I'm part of an exclusive group." And that feeling is incredibly powerful, especially because human beings have always craved belonging. People want to feel connected to something special. They want to associate themselves with groups that reinforce their personality and social image. The brand understood this before the competition did. While other companies were selling traditional luxury, this brand was selling attitude, boldness, the feeling of being ahead of the culture, and that attracted an entire younger generation that was tired of the old luxury rules. This new generation didn't just want to look elegant. They wanted to look unique. They wanted attention. They wanted to wear something that sparked reactions. And the brand delivered exactly that. Every piece felt almost like a personality statement. The people wearing it weren't trying to blend in. Quite the opposite. They were telling the world, "I don't need to follow the rules." And that's when everything changed. Because the moment a brand stops being just a product and starts representing identity, it gains something much stronger than customers. It gains followers, and followers defend, promote, and spread a brand with an intensity that no advertisement can buy. From that point on, the growth became unstoppable. Celebrities started wearing the pieces precisely because they created impact. Influencers realized that every photo featuring the brand generated comments and engagement, and the more visible the brand became, the more important it seemed. Even to people who still didn't fully understand why, that may have been the company's greatest move of all, turning controversy into fuel. While other brands avoided strong opinions, this one understood that intense emotions create connection. Because nobody falls in love with something neutral. People fall in love with things that make them feel something, and that's exactly how a brand that was once dismissed as a joke started transforming into a global cultural phenomenon. Up to that point, the brand was already getting attention. People were talking, critics were complaining, the internet was debating, but there was still one big question hanging in the air. Was this brand actually going to become something huge, or was it just another weird trend that would eventually disappear? Then the real turning point happened. Celebrities entered the game, and when that happens in fashion, everything changes because trends don't spread through products alone, they spread through influence. The moment a few artists started wearing the brand, public perception shifted almost overnight. What once looked ridiculous suddenly looked bold. What seemed excessive suddenly looked modern. And what people used to laugh at started looking like status. It's incredible how quickly public opinion changes when influential people validate something. Because human beings constantly watch the behavior of people they admire. If celebrities, musicians, and artists wear a certain brand, the brain automatically assumes there must be value behind it, even if people were mocking the exact same pieces just days earlier. And the brand understood this earlier than everyone else. It realized it didn't need to convince the entire world directly. It only needed to win over the right people, and that's exactly what happened. Singers started showing up wearing the pieces in concerts and interviews. Rappers turned the brand into a symbol of success. Influencers displayed the products online, like rare trophies people desperately wanted to own. And then came the most powerful effect of all, repetition. Because once people start seeing something everywhere, it stops feeling strange. It starts feeling important. Suddenly, the brand was everywhere. in photos, music videos, fashion events, social media feeds. And the more people saw it, the more desirable it became. Social media accelerated this process in a way the fashion industry had never seen before. Before the internet, trends could take years to spread worldwide. Now, one viral photo could make millions of people want the same product overnight. The logic became simple. If everybody is talking about it, it must be valuable. And very few companies in history have used that psychology as effectively as this brand did. Every release became an event. Every product felt limited. Every collection created urgency. People felt like they had to buy immediately before it disappeared. And that's where one of the most powerful mechanisms in modern luxury was born: scarcity. Because the rarer something feels, the more people want it. It's almost psychological. When something is available to everyone, part of the magic disappears. But when only a few people can access it, it gains an aura of exclusivity. And the brand mastered this strategy brilliantly. Products sold out within minutes. Lines formed outside stores. Resale prices exploded to absurd levels. And the harder it became to get a piece, the higher the status of the people who managed to own one. What's fascinating is that, at this point, product quality wasn't even the main factor anymore. The real value was perception. Luxury is perception. It's the feeling of belonging to an exclusive circle. It's owning something most people can't reach, and very few brands understood this as deeply as this one did. It realized that in the modern world, exclusivity creates desire, and desire creates obsession. But maybe the smartest move of all was something else entirely. The brand never tried to look perfect. It kept provoking people. It kept creating debate. It kept releasing pieces that divided opinion, and that kept public attention permanently locked onto the brand. While traditional luxury companies depended on expensive advertising campaigns, this brand achieved something far more powerful: free marketing. Every criticism created conversation. Every controversy became news. Every launch dominated social media and cultural discussions. Without realizing it, the public was doing the advertising for them. And that's how an idea that was once dismissed and mocked slowly transformed into a global status symbol. What once looked like a strange trend was now seen as a sign of influence, modernity, and cultural power. And maybe the craziest part is how fast it all happened. First, people laughed, then they criticized, then they started copying it, and before they realized it, the brand had already conquered the world. There's one part of this story that might be even more impressive than the brand's growth itself. It never tried to appeal to everyone, and when you think about business, that sounds completely backwards. Because most companies are built around one goal: reach as many people as possible. They avoid controversy. They try to look safe. They chase mass approval. After all, the more people like your brand, the more successful you should become, right? But this brand discovered something very few companies are willing to accept. Being deeply loved by a small group can be far more powerful than being casually accepted by everyone. And that idea changed everything. While other brands were trying to stay neutral, this one did the exact opposite. It created products that divided opinion. It leaned into bold designs. It accepted the risk of criticism. Because deep down, the company understood something incredibly powerful about human psychology. People desire what feels exclusive. And exclusivity depends on separation. It depends on the feeling that not everyone gets access. This is one of the oldest social mechanisms in human history: exclusive clubs, private communities, limited edition items. All of these things create desire because they create the perception of rarity. The human brain naturally assigns more value to things that feel difficult to obtain, and the brand mastered this idea brilliantly. It never wanted everyone to fully understand its vision. In fact, the fact that some people didn't understand it actually made the brand stronger. Because the people who did understand it felt like they belonged to something special, almost like a secret cultural language. The people wearing those pieces weren't just buying clothes. They were saying, "I'm part of this. I understand this trend. I belong to this world." And that feeling of belonging is incredibly powerful, far more powerful than premium materials, technical craftsmanship, or perfect stitching. Because human beings don't just buy objects, they buy meaning, emotion, identity. And this brand understood that before almost everyone else. It realized luxury isn't just about expensive products. Luxury is symbolism. It's about making someone feel like they occupy a different position in society. And the harder it felt to enter that world, the more desirable it became. That's why the brand avoided becoming too common. It limited products, released scarce collections, maintained a constant aura of exclusivity, because if everyone could access it easily, part of the magic would disappear, and this created an almost addictive psychological effect. People stopped wanting only the products. They started craving the feeling those products represented. Owning a piece became a way to signal social status, not just wealth, but cultural influence, modernity, belonging. And maybe that was the brand's greatest secret of all. It made people feel like they were buying something bigger than a product. They were buying a more interesting version of themselves. That explains why so many consumers defended the brand so passionately. They weren't just protecting a company, they were protecting an identity they now felt connected to. And when a brand creates that kind of emotional connection, it stops being just a brand. It becomes a cultural symbol. And that's exactly what happened here. The company realized that true modern luxury isn't simply about owning something expensive. It's about owning something that represents emotional exclusivity, something that makes you feel like you belong to a different world than everyone else. And once a brand creates that feeling, price almost stops mattering, because at that point, people are no longer buying out of necessity. They're buying meaning, they're buying emotion, they're buying the feeling of being seen differently, and that's what transformed an idea that was once mocked and dismissed into a global phenomenon, not because everybody loved the brand, but because not everybody understood it. Today, looking back at this entire story, it almost feels impossible to believe that this brand was once treated like a joke. When you see billions of dollars moving through the company, products selling out within minutes, celebrities fighting to get exclusive releases, everything suddenly feels obvious, it feels planned, it feels inevitable. But in the beginning, it was the complete opposite. Almost nobody believed it would work. Some people thought the brand was way too excessive, others thought it looked ridiculous, and many were absolutely convinced it would disappear within a few years. But there's something fascinating about innovation. The ideas that eventually change the world rarely look brilliant at first. Most of the time, they look strange, confusing, uncomfortable. Sometimes, even laughable, because anything that truly breaks the pattern challenges what people are already comfortable accepting, and human beings naturally resist the unfamiliar. That's why so many revolutions start with ridicule. It happened with technology, it happened with artists, it happened with entire cultural movements. First, people laugh, then they criticize, and eventually, they start copying. That brand went through the exact same process. At first, it looked far too absurd to succeed. But while the traditional luxury world was busy protecting old rules, this brand realized something that would completely redefine modern luxury. In today's world, attention matters more than perfection, because perfection without relevance gets ignored. But something bold, imperfect, and provocative can dominate conversations around the world, and maybe that was the brand's greatest genius of all. It understood that being impossible to ignore was far more powerful than trying to please everyone. While other companies were focused on looking flawless, this brand focused on creating reactions, creating debate, creating emotion, because emotion creates memory. People quickly forget things that feel ordinary, but they never forget things that make them feel something. And that's exactly how this brand went from being seen as a joke to becoming a global reference point. It didn't win by following the system, it won by challenging it. It turned criticism into publicity. It turned weirdness into identity. It turned exclusivity into obsession. And in the process, it revealed something much bigger about human behavior itself. People don't just want products. They want stories, meaning they want to feel like they belong to something special. And the more unlikely that story feels, the more powerful it becomes. Maybe that's why this journey still fascinates people today, because it proves that success doesn't always come from immediate approval. Sometimes, it comes from doubt, from rejection, from mockery. The brand that started as a joke ended up teaching the world an uncomfortable truth. What looks ridiculous today might become tomorrow's ultimate status symbol. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Never underestimate an idea just because it seems strange in the beginning, because some of the greatest revolutions in history started exactly the same way, with someone looking at it and saying, "There's no way this will work," and somehow it did, on a massive scale. So now let me ask you something. Do you think there's a brand, trend, or idea today that people are laughing at right now, but could eventually become the next global phenomenon? Because history shows this happens far more often than we realize. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out the next videos. Because here, the world's most unlikely stories always end up revealing the biggest secrets about success, power, and human behavior.